Today's guest is Meinl cymbals artist JPvusiccom. JP is one of the best people I know. Despite our age difference, with me being definitely some years older than him, I've learned a lot from listening to him. In fact, without going into detail, because that would take way too long for this intro for the show, there was a vlog that JP released years back, and his main message from that vlog had a huge impact on me and inadvertently caused a distinct change of direction that I then took in my focus in my job at Meinl. It was funny, because when I first met JP backstage at the Guitar Center Drum-Off Finals in Los Angeles, he had just finished performing, a performance that I enjoyed quite a bit, and I walked up to him to tell him so, and to basically say, "Hey man, thanks for a great show, that was fun," that kind of thing. I don't really read a book by its cover if I can help it, because you'll usually be proven wrong if you do that, but I do have to say that the mohawk that JP was sporting at that time greatly exacerbated the difference between what I saw and what I experienced when we spoke. JP exuded a calm and a focus that immediately made me want to be calm and focused. Zen pretty much emanated from him. That zen that he somehow comes by so naturally is what makes him tick above all else. It works hand in hand with his insane focus and discipline, resulting in a guy who's experienced more and achieved more than most people 3 times his age. Having French lineage, JP decided he wanted to book some clinics in France. So, he learned French so he could speak it at all of his clinics there. He wanted to travel to other countries, bum around and see the sights? Well, he booked clinics on his own in order to do so. He wanted to study psychology as an adult? He applied and was accepted into one of the most prestigious universities in the US. The list goes on. JP is an inspiration. Did I mention how unbelievably great of a drummer he is? All of the previous attributes I mentioned have all added up to result in a guy whose abilities on the drum set are matched by very few. And he's so unassuming about it too. When you watch him play, you're blown away, realizing that you may have a private viewing of one of the modern-day new breed greats. I heard a story about a certain drum shop in a large city where JP and some others were doing a clinic. Apparently, an extremely famous drummer came into the shop that day while JP and a few others were setting up. The drummer sat down at a kit next to JP and was apparently somewhat gregarious and a little bit like, "Here kid, let me show you a thing or two." Once this drummer played and ended his demonstration, the story goes that it was JP's turn to play a little bit, and then JP tore this guy up. But, I was told, he did it with a smile and a pleasant verbal exchange all the while. And that's JP, polite as can be and never with any malicious intent. Okay, you want to play drums? I'll play drums. So, hopping on a call with JP for the Meinl radio podcast was not work in any sense of the word, but rather a great conversation with a guy whom I immensely enjoy and admire. I hope you enjoy the podcast. I'd like to welcome everybody into the Meinl Radio podcast. Today we've got longtime Meinl cymbal artist and all-around kick-ass dude, JPvusiccom with us. JP, what's up? It's good to hear from you, man.
It's good to be here.
Man, I'm going to launch right in because I've got a lot I wanted to talk to you about. So when I catch up with you, I'm always really interested in what you're currently involved in. So at the risk of lobbing a selfish question first and indulging my own curiosities, I have to ask, what are you currently up to these days?
Okay, well, what am I up to? There's, on the drum side of things, you mean just the drum side of things?
Whatever is making your life tick at the moment.
Hell yeah. Well, the drum side of things, the most exciting thing is my band, Childish Japes. We just did 2 writing retreats, about 5 days each, up in cabins that we rented in Pennsylvania, because we're a little bit spread out right now. And those were amazing. So we've got 20 songs that we like, and we're going to put some very cool music out in a while, when it's done. So that's moving along. And I'm always chipping away at my website. You know, there's a weekly video there that goes up, and I'm always making those, trying to make them better, trying to update the curriculum. And we're working on, secretly, we're working on a major overhaul of my site right now that I'm very excited to hopefully get done in the next few months. So if you're listening to this in the future, I'd say 2021, it's probably already there. But there's that. I am the... what's my title? I'm the educational director at a drum school in China that I'm writing a curriculum for like 8 to 10 different levels of drumming instruction starting from like day one. So that's a bit of a journey and an interesting challenge for me as well, especially because I haven't taught a lot of beginners. But that's going on. That's the bulk of the drumming stuff right now. And then the other half of my life, really, and at the moment it's actually probably 90% of my life, is I'm back in school. I'm getting an undergraduate degree in psychology from Columbia here in New York, and classes have moved online. I'm about a year in, and so I spend most of my day sitting either in front of my computer in a Zoom class or in front of a book reading assignments for school.
Nice. And so a couple of questions that came to my mind from that. So what made you decide on a degree in psychology?
Well, there's a bit of a build-up to it. I mean, for really the root way back was probably when I was 24-ish, 23-ish. That's when like the idea of mindfulness and meditation kind of found me. And I started getting interested in that. I was actually interested. One of my favorite comedians as a kid was this guy, Kyle Cease. And he turned into kind of a transformational speaker, and he started hosting these like weekend getaway things. And there's just a couple of videos of his that at the young age of 22, 23, like really struck me and really got me excited about, I guess paying a little bit more attention to my own mind and the experience of being me along the way. And that's where it all kind of started. And then there were some other little minor turning points. Like I was traveling a ton when I was 23, 24, 25, just booking like, sort of grassroots, self-organized clinic tours around the world that were like equal parts me making a career move and trying to like build that aspect of my life, and another equal part of, I can go travel wherever I want if I can book enough stuff to make it make sense. At that point, I wasn't even like concerned about making money. I was just concerned about not losing money. So I was out doing a bunch of that, and there was like a very specific, important return from one trip. I won't say where I went, but I got back, and it was the first time that I got back from one of these, and I was like, that was not fun. That felt like work. It was a place I'd been before. I was getting the same questions. I was teaching the same things. I was just like, suddenly I'm not challenging myself, and that wasn't fun. And at the same time, two of the two main bands I was in, sort of one of them sort of dissipated. The other one, the main guy moved to another city. So suddenly I was like, okay, I just had like teaching suddenly is not exciting after being like in the trenches for 3 years, traveling, doing it nonstop. And I don't have a place to do all this drumming stuff that I'm interested in doing. That like the reason, I go practice all day, every day, and I have no musical project I can put the ideas in at all, right? So if I'm not doing clinics because I'm tired of them, I don't have a musical project, what the hell am I doing being a drummer, So that was a bit of a turning point where it sort of like for the first time in my mind, like flashed the idea of like, well, maybe I could do something else. I had a bunch of time free at the time. I was no longer traveling. And at the time, it was like one of my low points in drumming. And I was like, like maybe I'm not going to drum forever. And I don't feel like that way anymore, right? That phase passed. And that was actually the impetus for me starting my band Childish Shapes, which has since its inception been absolutely the most rewarding thing I've ever done with music. So those feelings are long gone, and I'm really happier than ever. But that was an interesting turning point. Again, that sort of flagged this, like maybe there's something else in your life that you should explore. And then like years later, I kind of realized, in retrospect, like I had been reading a lot of books from psychologists and neuroscientists and philosophers. And it kind of dawned on me after time, because again, I was still entertaining this like low-key idea of like maybe alongside drumming I can like do another thing. And I started to have like sort of crazy ideas about what they could be. And then it kind of dawned on me as like, oh, I actually have this other passion. And I've had it for a long time, right? Like the human experience and human psychology and mindfulness and what that all means. And I had a very basic, I still do, but then even more basic understanding of the lay of the land in the field. But that was where sort of psychology got at least put on my map of potential ideas. And then the final tipping point was I was on this bike tour in Iceland for 3 weeks. We did the Ring Road, which is like 700 miles. It's brutal but absolutely gorgeous landscapes. And we made it about 500 miles. We were going pretty slow. But I was reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning on that trip, and just this confluence of events, so good. Required reading, and it's all of like 100 pages or something. But so I was reading that, and on this really life-changing like trip for multiple reasons, but with two people that I absolutely love, who are super open and wonderful, and seeing really just the most beautiful bits of earth I've ever seen. And feeling this incredible distance from like the me that I know on a daily basis back in New York. And just the idea that I'm a drummer seemed so abstract. And the idea that like I had this continuous life, it really started to look like I just had fallen into this by accident in some way. So as an adult now, that was the last tipping point where I was like, I'm gonna apply to school. And that's when I started the process and threw my name in the hat for Columbia, and I was very surprised I got in, and it's been really awesome. Yeah, like a year and a half in at this point. But that's what brought me here. It was a genuine interest, and honestly having enough time and control of my career that there is enough time to spare some mental energy and start to learn something else.
Now, and thank you for that really awesome explanation of how you got there. It's super interesting, and you touched on some points that I was going to bring up later, so now it's perfect time. It was great to hear you say that Childish Japes has been the best musical experience of your life. So I need to ask, if you had to articulate it, maybe instead of like collectively as a band, maybe just for you personally, what's your main goal for that band?
The really root main goal is for us to be able to go to the space of Childish Japes and do whatever we want and not have to think twice about it at all. Right? This is me speaking about my desires and intentions for the band, but I think we're pretty much on the same page. It's meant to be a creative sandbox, right? A safe space, a place where we're not concerned about an image, we're not concerned about like being clever about what we write and writing things that people will like. And we happen to be interested in music that I think is listenable. So like the natural result of our playing is something that is, not ridiculously abstract, but it's just a free-for-all. That is the ultimate goal for the band. And the secondary goal, which is a very close second, I guess. No, it's not that close, I guess, because it would exist without the second goal. The second goal is for us to get to a place where we can go to major cities and bring like 100 people out to a show. I mean, that's been my goal from the beginning, is like fill a jazz club of people that love what we do, are there to see us, and just be completely free to do whatever we want, right? Play a fully improvised set, bring a singer for half the show. We bring instrumentalists. We just did an album with just instrumental featuring an amazing saxophone player and piano player. So really, the band's meant to be this door into, a place where our creative outlets can just run wild.
And so you guys have zero business aspirations, zero business goals. It's literally, this is your space to do what you guys want to do as a band musically, and if anything ever came of it that appealed to you on a business level, great, but that's not the goal at all.
Right. I think the band would exist either way, but I mean, you can't help but think about how to make the band successful along the way, but it's not the reason we do it, and it's not the main priority. And sometimes I get caught up in that side of things, and I am usually able to do it, but I frequently need to remind myself of what we're trying to do and why this is important and special, and that this is a place to to feel open and free and happy about what we're doing, not a place to get stressed and concerned about the future and be riddled with anxiety about whether or not it's going to quote unquote work out or we're going to quote unquote make it in the end. I have to remind myself, but that's where it's going. I want it to succeed. I mean, hey, if we're playing, to 1,000 people at venues someday, I'll take it. But I don't really care, honestly. And in the shows I've played throughout my life, the funness of playing the show does not correlate with the size of the audience. In fact, there's like a tipping off point where it turns back down, right? Past like a small intimate venue of 200 people. I think from there, in my experiences as the drummer at the back of the stage at least, it starts to become less personal. And you start to need to amplify things so much that the drums sort of lose their natural character in their delivery. You know what I mean? There's all these things where it's like you need monitors, and then you need in-ear monitors, and you can't really listen well to your bandmates, and you're not that close together because the stage might be too big. And it's like, of course, there are like good versions of big shows, and there are worse versions of big shows. But in my experience, all my favorite shows have been packed small shows. So if that's where we end up, that'll be a really happy place to be.
Now, also, something else that you brought up, you had brought up the clinic tours that you used to do, where you would go to other parts of the world. And I got to say, I loved it because you were really self-sufficient. You just did it. So back in the days of clinic tours, when that was a real thing that companies did with artists as part of a branding and marketing effort, artists, more often than not, would actually be the ones asking for clinics. And more often than not, companies would have to jump through all these logistical and financial hoops to make it happen. But with you would just call me or email me, and you said where you were going, and the most you might need would be one set of cymbals to travel with you the whole time. And something people should know, I think, that was pretty cool, is that you learned enough French in order to go to France and give clinics all in the French language. Right? That's correct, right?
Yeah. I had been, to be fair, I'd been working on French, and that I needed to impose a test on myself that would force me to really do the studying. So about a year in advance, I booked that French clinic tour, being like, okay, well, like I really need to be fluent by then. I'd been studying before. I kind of did some in high school, forgot it all, did some after college, forgot it all. And this was like another third effort. So yeah, the end result was teaching in French in France, but it was the thing to light the fire for me.
Well, what I was wondering is, I mean, this is a pretty simple question, but were those tours booked so that you could travel to places you wanted to travel to, or were the tours the main purpose, and getting to see another part of the world was just sort of a kind of this like ancillary benefit? And it doesn't matter to me either way. I was always impressed how you never really asked squad of Meinl to make those happen, but I was curious like the real purpose behind them.
Yeah, and it's actually hard for me to tease them apart. I don't know. I think I was pretty equally stoked about both aspects. I was obviously like thrilled to be seeing any part of the world that I hadn't been to, which when I started doing this, I hadn't traveled a whole lot. And it was after I had done like one, I think I saw the potential of both sides of what you described, because on the the non-drumming, my own personal development side, it was the coolest way to travel, because you show up somewhere not as a tourist, but as a guest and a friend of a local host who was more often than not either just a local drummer who had been like, yeah, you could stay with me and I'll help you organize a little camp in my living room, or someone that was involved in a school or a shop or a professional drummer. Sometimes because I don't, especially at the time, my knowledge of like who's the big drummers in Russia and China and stuff was extremely limited. So I'd show up, and then after the fact, I'd realize like, oh, this person I'm staying with is like a super well-respected drummer here or whatever. So I was landing into this position where I like kind of had automatically like a little friend group when I'd go somewhere. And it was just the coolest thing to really just stay at people's apartments and sort of get a little window into, normal life, which I always think is the coolest way to see places.
Absolutely.
And then on the career side and the drumming side, I think I saw the potential there too, because I mean, it blew my mind, honestly, when I got back from like my first, well, no. The first time I tried to do this, again, very young, no idea about how the world works or finances or what it costs to do anything. I lost tons of money by the time I got home, but I hadn't really booked anything. I just booked a bunch like fun. I'm going to drive around and rent a car. But then the second time I did it, I was blown away because I got home and I had made money. And I sort of wasn't even paying attention at the time, doing any math. Like I hadn't done any like preemptive planning. This is a little window into how my brain worked at the time. I was just like, fuck it, let's go. And I remember getting back from this long trip and being like, oh, I actually made money. That's crazy. So then it started to seem like, oh, this can be the ultimate just win, 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 right? Not only do I go and have the time of my life, I'm also making money. I'm also furthering my career in useful ways. I'm also making connections. And presumably, at least I hope, if I'm doing a good job, it's a win for the people who are helping me host these things, because most of the feedback I would get from people is just like gratitude because they live in an area where they don't get a lot of events. They live in a country where like that always gets skipped on the touring map or something. So it really just ended up this beautiful situation. So it's kind of hard to tease apart, honestly, why I was doing it. I think they were just it was such a purely good thing from every angle that it is just easy to see in retrospect why I got so deep into it, why it was my favorite thing and my sort of mission statement for a few years.
You said something interesting earlier. Part of your disillusionment would probably be a pessimistic term, but maybe something that steered you in a different direction towards psychology, studying psychology, was that you were getting the same questions on these clinic tours. And while I understand that being something that maybe you weren't really into, did it surprise you that drummers tended to ask the same questions over and over in different places?
No, it's not surprising. We're all, the vast majority of drummers go through like really similar steps along their development. So it's not surprising at all, especially now. And really, the fact that I was just having the same experience at multiple clinics was a part of the bigger issue of I am not feeling challenged. You know what I mean? And I was playing solos and I was repeating ideas. I was going to literally the same drum schools I'd been to, and it was a country that I had actually been to at that point, like, a handful of times. And it just played a bigger part in this, like, okay, like, nothing right now is pushing me. It's like forcing me to get better. And it feels very stagnant after this period of like really intense expansion and, new experiences. So to feel like I just had 10 days of a trip of total mundane work was just such a shock to me that I think it really forced me to think hard about what the next phase was going to be. And I also think it was an age thing, Like, the idea of traveling is less attractive to me at 30 now. And at that time, I was stoked to I'll sleep on your floor. I don't care. I'll stay up all night. I'll take as many flights as I need to get there. I'll sleep 24 hours in the Singapore airport. Like, whatever. Now I'm like, okay. Like, at least give me a bed. Do you know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah. Right now you're at least give me a bed. Wait a few more years and see where your thinking is. It'll be funny. Yeah. But so also something else you mentioned was your website. And I'm curious, how long ago did you start this? It's a subscription-based educational website for people that don't know. It's JPvusiccom. And what was the impetus for doing so? Had you seen someone else that had an educational website and had done well with it, a guy like Mike Johnston? Maybe not. It's okay if it wasn't him or anybody at all.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what was the initial impetus? And how has the website figured into your ability to make a living? Has it been a crucial component at times? Has it been a negligible component? Yeah, curious.
Yeah, my website launched exactly a year after I won the drum off. So that was January 2012, and the website launched January 2013. So I've been at it for 7 years now. I just had my 500th video just went up a week or two ago.
Wow.
And the website has been, I'm really bad at like time traveling back to my state when I was younger. I don't remember where the idea came from. I don't think I knew of any online educators at the time. Surely I knew that it was a thing, and that I wanted to do it. But yeah, I happened to be in this very fortunate situation where my oldest friend, essentially the closest thing I have to a brother, and my roommate at Berkeley, Mike Linden, happened to also be a fantastic computer programmer. He'd been programming since he was like 16 years old, or maybe 14 years old. So he helped me build the site, and he still helps me build the site. And I just wanted to share. I still feel a natural desire to share things. I think it's exciting and just inherently rewarding. And it makes the learning of the things all that much more exciting if you have someone to tell them to and share in the excitement. So I loved sharing. At that point in my life, sharing was like what I was all about. I just wanted to tell people my thoughts. I wanted to make videos just freaking, going off on a tangent about whatever. I was really just totally had no shame about that stuff. And I have, I've developed a little bit of self-censorship over the years. Again, maybe it's getting older. Maybe it's sort of actually having a bit of a following now. I feel like there's more pressure to not say absolute nonsense to people. But at the time, I didn't care. There's no holds barred. And all I wanted to do was just share what I was learning. So I launched the site really not knowing much about what I was doing. And it was just a weekly thing. And it really hasn't changed structure-wise as far as how it works. It's going to change a little bit with the next update in a major way. But yeah, it's just been this thing that I've never not liked doing it. I've gone through like some uninspired phases, but for the most part, as soon as I turn the camera on, I'm stoked because it's just me, right? There's no other input, and really no one in the drumming world sees what goes on there unless you're a student. And it is really, I take time to be grateful for it pretty much every time I post a video, because that's where all my best ideas are, like all my best teaching is. And all the, I'm a big believer in like the best you comes out when you are improvising, when you're in the flow, when you give yourself that space to just get into it and be yourself. And every time I do a video, it's an opportunity to do that, right? I know what subject I'm going to be teaching, but I haven't, well, some of the times I have, but I haven't necessarily taught it before. And everything is one take, right? So it's meant to be like you're sitting in the room with me and I'm trying to walk you through this part of the concept, right? And many of the courses are organized in, anywhere from 5 to like 40 videos. So I just find time and time again, as soon as I turn that camera on, like good ideas come, the metaphors come, and I always end up having a lot of fun doing it. And it's just so rewarding knowing that there's this small, completely private, not on social media community where we don't even have a way to talk to each other. Right? There's no like community aspect to my website at all. And it's really sort of a beautiful thing. So it plays a role in my fulfillment, I think, every day. It has 100% pushed me as a teacher and a drummer to figure out how to explain difficult concepts, right? Because my website is very much not an encyclopedia of interesting grooves, right? You cannot learn how to play the samba, the bossa nova. There's like no 101 type stuff. To a fault. It's a terrible business idea, but I have to just try to be authentic in what I'm doing in order to make it fun. And so it's about what I think and how I think about the drums and my techniques, my techniques for developing creativity, and really over time what it's become is this focus on, like, my niche is improvisation and creativity and teaching it. because doing it is one thing. Teaching creativity is a whole nother thing. And I think it is seldom taught well, and it's almost impossible to make into a system. So I feel like if there's anything that I would like, really stake a claim in being proud of, is the sort of pseudo systems and concepts I've developed for helping in improvisation, develop improvisation. And it's been really cool to see students do it along the way, and I really see huge progress in that regard. So drumming, and as a teacher, it's been huge. And then financially, yeah, it's like a half of my financial life. Right? I have a very humble, my website compared to like major websites is extremely humble, but the fact that it's regular is really just very unique and special, and I'm very grateful for that. It's roughly the same thing every month. So that goes a long way in the unpredictable world of music, especially now.
Wow. All right, I'm going to shift a little bit here. There was a question that I needed to ask you. Well, you know what? Wait, I did want to ask you one other thing about your site. So you have a section at AMA, Ask Me Anything. What's the strangest, just off the top of your head, what's the strangest Ask Me Anything you've been given?
What do I think of Jordan Peterson?
Well, you have talked about it. You've talked to me about him before. You don't have to tell everybody here what you think about him.
I don't remember.
But that's what you were asked.
Yeah, that was probably, I don't know if it's this, it's probably strange. I get some pretty direct, normal drumming questions most of the time. That's the one that was the most out of left field, I'd say.
Did you feel like you were being set up to fail or something? Like you being lobbed some sort of political question that was going to get you in hot water?
I don't know. I think, I don't know. I'm very uninterested in tying irrelevant ideas into my drum set, especially ones that can be polarizing or any sort of like turn people off.
Yeah.
So that was one that was just sort of disarming in the sense that I was like, I don't feel like I can give a actually, the main thing I thought, I really don't think anyone, like the vast majority of people on my website, care about this subject.
No.
Nor do I think I have anything particularly interesting to say on a public intellectual that I don't really follow very closely. So, yeah, that was probably the strangest curveveball.
Yeah, that was, someone was lobbing something at you as bait. That was bait for sure.
Yeah.
Now, totally different scenario, but so people may not know this, but you were the touring drummer for Generation Axe for quite some time. And for those that don't know, it was more or less a guitar wank fest in a good way that featured Tosin Abasi, Nuno Bettencourt, Zach Wilde, Yngwie Malmsteen, and Steve Vai. And when you joined the backing band for the tour, the previous drummer had to leave on quick notice, and the tour was already underway, so it was now in danger of having to possibly even pull the plug because of being hard-pressed to find a drummer that could come in at the 11th hour, learn, and convincingly play all of that material right away within a couple of days. But you did. And so from the start, you were immediately in all of the guitar players' good graces. These guys that have been through the ego game before, and some of them still have it. Now suddenly they owe you a debt of gratitude, at least for a few days. So, what was your experience having to play with artists that you knew pretty much nothing about and whose music is not your personal cup of tea? Was it as much of a brain scramble for them being around you as it was for you to be around them? Did you feel like you were able to hop into a time machine and witness a musical time and place that had had its heyday from a long time ago?
I think had I ever listened to or been interested in that decade and genre of music, it would have felt a little more time machiney. But it just, I think it was probably more strange for them than me because of how uneducated and uninformed I am about their whole era of music.
Oh, dude, I gotta jump in and tell everybody something that you told me. You said you were sitting either like on the tour bus or backstage with Zach Wilde, who you said was always completely cool. And
the coolest.
You told me that he asked you one day, like, brother, like, who's your favorite classic rock band? And you're like, I don't listen to classic rock. And he's just looking at you blinking like, what?
Yeah. And he was like, there's another... Yeah, I would like people's sort of minds would short circuit when they like were trying to wrap their heads around the fact that I truly don't know anything about their entire world that has defined their whole life. There was another time with Zach, who again is really the sweetest man alive. He was like JP, Father JP. He's like, so what's your favorite John Bonham song? Like what's just the drum part that you like? And I was literally like, I literally don't know.
Wait, was that what he asked you?
I've never been inspired by John Bonham. That might have been that story.
That's what he asked you. I made up the classic rock part. Sorry.
And he just kept re-asking me like no, but like, what's your favorite song of John Bonham? And I was just like, I literally don't. I could tell you a song, but I don't have one. You know what I mean? And it just was hilarious. His brain was just short circuiting because his whole life was just like, dude, Led Zeppelin is everything.
Dude, it's funny. I mean, when I went to, I've told you this before, but people out there and listening to the podcast don't know. I mean, when you had been on the tour for maybe 2 weeks and you came to Nashville at the Ryman and I watched you guys play. And for me, it short-circuited me because I'm watching Yngwie up on stage being Yngwie, which if anybody knows what Yngwie's like, I mean, dude, he's decked in leather. His shirt's like unbuttoned down to his belly button. He's throwing around like crazy Euro rock god poses, and you were behind the kit. This is before you had your long hair and beard, so you're behind the kit, clean shaven. You've got like it just looked like you had gone to H&M and shopped for like
wearing like a flower hat, like a hat with flowers on it,
like a biker would wear, or like some guy in his 10-speed or something. Yeah, you had one of those hats on, and then a little tight little H&M t-shirt, and so it's like watching this like East Nashville hipster. No offense, that's what you were brought into an East Nashville hipster relief kind of look to me when I compared to Yngwie. And
totally.
So like on a visual level, it was all wrong. I mean, it just couldn't have been more wrong. But on an audio level, I mean, dude, you nailed it. So it was, I mean, whatever. You can dress any way you want.
It's so funny. Yeah. It was hilarious. True. It still is. I mean, it's really, I think back sometimes to this like thing I said once that I really believed when I was in college at Berkeley. I was like, I had a mohawk in college, and I really enjoyed this idea, and actually to a certain degree in different ways in my life now, I still have this in me, but I enjoyed the idea of looking, of surprising people, right? Of not meeting people's expectations, of being like a jazz fusion drummer who looks like a punk rock drummer. And I was also at the time in like 1,000 projects, because that's what you do at school. I was in like a prog rock, jazz rock, prog thing trio with Felix Martin. And I was doing, jazz and Latin music ensemble. And I had this dream at the time. I remember verbalizing this. I don't know to who. But I was like, I love the idea of like two people meeting and being like, dude, I just saw this like metal show and it was sick and the drummer was dope. And then this other guy being like, dude, I just saw this like jazz gig at whatever club. And them being like slowly figuring out like, no, it can't be the same guy. No. And then realizing it's the same guy and being like, whoa, man. So really, I think immediately before or after one of the Generation X tours, we had done a Childish Japes album. And we're kind of a jazz band that plays very quietly. And I really, I hadn't thought about it in years, but it like struck me in that moment. And I was like, wow, that kind of came true. Like, not that the fans are meeting each other or ever will, but it's just hilarious to think about like playing. I mean, the Book of Japes album has like straight up out of time, nearly free jazz improv. And then to go play, I mean, playing with Yngwie Malmsteen is just like, I feel like I'm fulfilling like this meme alternate, life of mine that is just, it's awesome. But I must say, playing that, so I never understood classic rock. Like, my parents didn't listen to it. No one in my life listened to it growing up. And when I did hear it, I was like, okay, like, it's cool, but, like, I don't know, it's not that cool. But then I must say, when I heard it live, it was a totally different thing. Shit made way more sense, right? Because with Zach, we would just play Ozzy Osbourne, like, song. We would just play Black Sabbath and do it live as a trio. And that's when I was like, oh, this is epic. Like, these riffs through a real huge PA really, really do some damage. This rocks. You know what I mean? I was like, it hit me. I was like, oh, this is rock and roll. I get it now. So yeah, it helped me understand where this was all coming from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now,
yeah.
Speaking of, like, coming in and sitting in for people, so you had to sub for Matt Halpern on a run of Periphery shows. And I'm curious about that experience. Now, not to say that their songs all sound the same, because they don't, but when I hear Periphery, I hear a very common musical theme, or like a feel running through their music. I mean, Halpern's got a super identifiable groove to what he does, and
totally.
It really fits in with the sort of staccato, percussive nature of the guitar riffs of that band. And I mean, they just lock in really well together. And so throughout their music, they've got this feel. And when you're having to learn tunes that quickly on the fly and come in and just make stuff happen, I mean, I know you did a vlog about this whole thing, your whole experience, so people can watch that and get a more in-depth view. But just real quick for this podcast, I'm curious, was, my fear, if I'd been in your shoes, would have been confusing one song with another, even if you'd had a cheat sheet. So did that ever happen where you thought you were playing this, but you were playing that?
Yeah, it's funny. In that, like, genres like Periphery, it's funny because in the beginning, I remember, like, when I first listened to stuff, I was like, yeah, it's kind of, like, it's hard to differentiate the stuff. But then obviously, like anything, you dig into it, and then they start to become very different beasts with very different, like, I'd say technical and musical focuses. So I didn't have that issue that you described. There was no confusion about that, except in the beginning, you know what I mean? And sort of, like, it's funny because learning songs, like, for some reason, the hardest thing is always just remembering what the name of every song is. You know what I mean? Like, you learn all this music and someone's like, you're not thinking about the name while you do the learning, and then someone's like, okay, prayer position, and you're like, damn, like, what one is that? And they're like, it's the one in triplets or whatever. And then it's like, oh, okay. But no, and it's funny because it's funny to zoom out too, because, like, Halpern, people like Garska, people like me, like, we come from sort of the same generation of, like, drumming influence and, like, innovators before us. So to zoom out, it's interesting to see tendencies of your generation without ever having been conscious of them, right? So the reason I bring this up is because it's interesting to compare to Generation X, because Generation X, if I'm just, like, if I needed to BS a section in either of those gigs, because in the moment I was forgetting the kick pattern, or I didn't remember what section was coming next, I could more convincingly do the Periphery one. I could bullshit the Periphery stuff than Generation X, like, authentically, you know what I mean? I might be playing technically the wrong thing, but it would at least seem convincing to an uneducated listener. And it just goes to show that, like, it's fun. A lot of people think it's would be the other way, but, like, me, I'm so unnatural playing classic rock that even playing, like, just fills at the end of sections, like, the guitarist would be like, hey, like, try a fill like this, and they would sing, like, a fill that anyone who's ever played classic rock would play. But it's just not the way my brain works, because it didn't come up listening to that music. I wasn't programmed with it. Whereas it was the exact opposite experience with Periphery. It was like, me, the stuff that I do naturally sort of dovetails with what they do naturally, even though I don't play in a band like that. So that gig, those songs ended up being, in a weird way, like, easier for me to learn than the much longer set of Generation X, and the much, technically more simpler songs in Generation X. Like, one would maybe say objectively, like, yo, come on, it's 80s rock, it's meat and potatoes, But like, to do it authentically, I still feel like I don't do at all, and I think the guitarists probably secretly agree. But but yeah, that's kind of the biggest difference between the two.
No, it's interesting that you say that. It makes sense now, because of all the, like, when we do our annual deal where you come in and film videos for all of the new products or new cymbals we have coming out each year, and then we get that stuff on our Meinl Cymbals Products YouTube channel. So people don't really see until the B-roll footage shows. They don't see that it's you playing. But when they do see it, I've seen this comment before. They'll say something like, wow, you can really hear the periphery in his playing. And it's funny because I always thought, really? But...
Which is funny because I was with periphery for all of like 3 weeks.
Exactly.
If that, like, really shaped my playing in some way.
But that must be that sort of point of reference that you're talking about, that you share with guys like Garska and Halpern, that somehow comes out in your playing. And so, yeah, maybe they're, of course, they're thinking about the fact that you were with periphery, but I don't think they would just pull that thought out of thin air. Like, if you had never played with periphery, they probably wouldn't drop it and go, oh, he sounds just like periphery. I think it's a little combo of the two. But that's interesting. You also did a record with Good Tiger, Alex Rudinger's old band, correct?
Yeah.
How was that experience?
That was a blast. Yeah. It's funny because all of the three last things you've mentioned are like such different experiences, but also between Generation X and then like periphery Good Tiger combo, like the generational difference in attitudes of musicians it's like almost, it's the first thing that kind of comes to mind when I think about those two groups of people, right? The life that the Generation Xers lived, and granted, they're bigger than, like, as far as like the level of fame they achieved, they're bigger than periphery or Good Tiger, or probably most bands will ever be again, but just the attitude of people and their approach to music and their sort of outlook on life and everything is like very, very different. So correspondingly, it's a very different experience playing with them, right? Generation X, they've got, it differs between the guitarists, but like there's a specific part I'm supposed to play, and I'm supposed to just kind of, ideally, they should forget that I'm their drummer, right? It should feel like they're drumming with their normal drummer, right? Because everyone's coming together to play with a drummer that they don't usually play with. So I'm just trying to be invisible in that and just let them do their rock star thing and essentially forget that I exist. But with the other bands, like, I mean, with Periphery, I'm filling in, but with Good Tiger, it was really fun because they were like, you just do whatever we want you to just kind of do you, and Des sent demos and guitar parts and drum suggestions or not, if I remember correctly. And it was just, we did some back and forth. I have my little rehearsal space here with the mic set up, and he was just like, yeah, like, we're totally open to your input. That's why we want you to do it, because we think we like your sound. And so I would just spend time having a blast with these tracks under no time constraint, no time pressure. So that was really, really a fulfilling experience, actually, doing that album with them. It's also not, again, it's like, it's funny that I keep getting asked to like sub on like proggy, metal-y stuff, because the things I've subbed for that we've described is like almost the extent of my experience in that genre. Like, I don't consider myself a heavy drummer, a metal drummer. Every day I go practice on a jazz kit with like literally one cymbal. So it's weird that somehow I've found my way into that role. But yeah, I would just spend a bunch of time messing around, send stuff back and forth with Des, and then we spent 4 full days in a studio in Baltimore and just kind of chipped away, one song at a time. And even nothing was like note for note determined. I don't really function in that way anyways. So we had, general, this is the groove. And sometimes it was necessary to say this is the exact fill, and it kind of has to be this because of what the rest of the band is doing. But other than that, it was a really loose, kind of chill process. And Des was in the control room, and I'm out there playing along to the stuff, and he'd say, okay, it was cool, but like try a different fill here. Let's get some options here. Let's tune the snare differently, whatever it might be. And it just felt like this really organic thing that came together, and it felt like it was a rare and difficult balance to strike of me being allowed to do my thing and obviously trying to meet them, to deliver the sound that would complement their music, but also Des having feedback and shaping the sound and giving me the initial ideas and grooves. And it was this really nice balance between those things that felt like by the time we were done, it really just felt really good to have done. It was one of those things where it's like, wow, that really was how collaboration is supposed to work. You know what I mean? And I'm really proud of how the album came out at the end of the day. I love listening to it, actually.
That's awesome. So I've got a couple more quick questions for you here before we wrap it up. But so I'm curious about you and drumming. I know that you said about 90% of what you do right now is school and 10% is drumming at the moment. And I have to assume with the way you speak about it, you're still in love with drumming. So what is it about drumming right now in the immediate sense that you're most currently in love with it about?
Yeah, having venturing onto another path and starting from scratch with something else and being forced to take a lot of time away from drumming emphasizes how special it is. And not just my career, but to have a thing like drumming in my life. It's especially interesting in the context of studying psychology and having a particular interest in the study of well-being and human flourishing. Because quickly you encounter ideas like flow and the psychology of creativity and the intricate interconnection between like conscious and subconscious, muscle memory and intent. And the more I get into those things, the more I'm able to see them and sort of like provide some intellectual framework for what I'm watching unfold on the drums as I'm playing it. So it's like learning more about how my mind works, really makes the wonder of drumming, and especially improvisation, that's really most of what I care about on the drums, even more magical. Like it's not like revealing the wizard behind the curtain. It truly just makes it all that much more hard to believe that I can do what I can do. And I don't mean special things I can do, that anyone improvising can do what they're doing. And then you start thinking of, there's just, especially because I'm getting an graduate degree, it's like you encounter so many different ideas. And then you start thinking about evolutionary ideas, and you think like, why are we creative? Why do I come spend time doing this? And why do I find it fulfilling? Right? And why is this inherently fulfilling? Right? If I were never to perform again, I think I would still go practice. I think I would still play the drums just for me. That's what I do. 99% of my drumming happens by myself in my practice room anyways. So clearly there's something to it that is just inherently rewarding and that improves my life in some way. So all these different ideas, just encountering them has made me appreciate what I have more than ever on sort of a subjective level, the experience of it. But then also like veering off into another like sort of different career path. I'm not leaving drumming ever, right? What I'm doing is in addition to what I do and have done. And luckily, not to date our podcast eternally, but in coronavirus times, I happen to have a bunch of extra time right now. So there's the other aspect of it that like, right, I'm like 10-ish years deep, 8 years deep in sort of like a quote unquote professional music career. And I feel like I stumbled into that because, you're a kid when you choose to go to college. And my perspective of the world and people and life and what my life should be were so different, and I'm sure will continue to evolve every year that passes. But to do that again as an adult is just such a different experience, and to do it in a field that's a little bit more, infinitely interesting, but a little bit more systematic and a little more mundane, right? I'm doing like regular studying, right? As opposed to when I was at music college, my studying was like going to practice and like hanging out with my artsy friends and like writing lyrics and like just being a creative person. And since that's the only world I knew, getting into a different world that is more academic and more, in many ways, just more boring, right? There's a lot more sitting around and reading and just trying to wrap your head around like the literature, like let alone trying to innovate or think of new ideas, right? So being in this new field really makes me appreciate the world that I have existed in thus far. And that includes, like I said, the drumming, but also it includes the people that I know. Like, it's a really special type of person who has committed their life to creative endeavors. And I've always considered myself a little bit of not necessarily an artist at the core, right? So I have like a little bit more of an analytic personality than a lot of my truly like what I consider artistic friends. So to have friends who are so creative and artistic and just breathe and sleep and eat music and just any form of creativity, being outside of this community more and meeting people that are outside of it more has really made me see how special those people are in my life and how rare they are. So yeah, I was concerned honestly when I started going back to school for several reasons. I thought, one, people will think I'm unavailable and they'll stop calling me. And then years down the road when I've graduated and it doesn't matter anymore, they'll still think I'm busy. But I also thought, like, what will this do for my mentality in my other half of my life, the music career? And it's been a pleasant surprise that it has only underscored the importance and the just the sheer joy that I get from this part of my life. So
that's awesome.
It's been a really important move for me. I think I really needed to do it. I'm open to following it somewhere where it goes. It's not necessarily only for my learning. It will inform future teaching I do if I teach at a university. I'd love to teach the psychology of creativity, the psychology of memorization, psychological resilience for artists. There's so many doors that could potentially open down the road. And I don't know what they'll be, nor do I really care to think too hard about it right now, because I'm so green in the field that I really just need to learn things in general right now. But yeah, it has enhanced, I would say, the musical half of my life and the drumming half of my life, as well as sort of adding another rewarding, if not stressful, other half.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, last question for you, man. We started out by asking, what you're up to, and I understand, I know you, so this may not be the easiest question to ask, but in an immediate sense, what's next for you that people listening to this podcast would be interested to know about?
What's next for me? My new website is going to be sick. And honestly, this is the first time, like the last 8 months of my life or so, the first time I've really been comfortable saying this, is that I feel like my teaching, like, hit sort of an arrival point, a milestone about a year ago, where a lot of my different sort of methods or approaches, concepts, really sort of got tied together with like the master theory of the curriculum, if you will. So for the first time, I started really thinking of my pedagogy as a curriculum and like a proper academic experience on the drums. Right? For the first time, I feel like you can go to my website and start from scratch and become not like a basically proficient drummer, but you can become an excellent drummer. I feel like you can learn to improvise, and I've seen people do it. So really, that's one of the things I'm most excited about right now, is this new website is going to facilitate the delivery of that curriculum like 1,000 times better than what my site currently is. Because right now it's just a massive library with absolutely no direction or really organizational tools at all. So anyone making progress on my site right now, I'm just amazed because they've somehow been able to figure it out for themselves. So the next one's really going to be huge. And that is one of the most exciting things for me right now. And then really the new Childish Jape stuff. I mean, we just had such a wonderful time writing these songs in our little cabin getaway. And we will have a wonderful time recording them. And I feel like this album has vocals on it. We're working with Joanna Teeters, who's this amazing singer and a wonderful friend. And, we all contributed in all the ways, Everyone was writing lyrics together and melodies and coming up with arrangement ideas. And everyone contributed musical ideas. And everyone was so open. And it was such like a pure experience of creation that whatever it becomes and is released as, we will love it so much. I already know that we do. So that's just going to be exciting to see people receive that. And it's a ways out. We still have to record everything and mix everything, but
yeah.
But that's the immediate future. The more immediate future is I'm trying to figure out how to just go outside and exercise every day.
Yeah.
But aside from that, eating healthy and trying to not just literally sit in a chair and do homework and work on my site all the time. That's the immediate future for me.
Dude, I love it. JP, man, thank you so much for taking the time to fill all of us in, tell all of those who already know about you what maybe some things they didn't know, and those who knew nothing about you what they should know. And just thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for the thoughtful interview.
Thanks for listening to Meinl Radio. If you liked this episode, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We would appreciate it very much. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.